All right, guys. Hey, welcome back. This is your Wednesday live training. And today we are tackling the minimal processing, the importance of protein and decoding protein labels. So interesting enough, okay, so actually let me just kind of go another direction in 1 second, for a second. So in our programs and our coaching programs, and here in the free group, we talk as one of our key fundamentals is adequate amount of protein for both women and men, but because we're addressing the women in the group, and we've been working with women for over 25 years, we always see the deficiencies of and the lack thereof protein in their diets, in their nutrition, in their lifestyles. So this is like a super important topic. And, in our free group, we talk all the time about all, the habits, and then we, of course, relate, those bad habits. And then we talk about good habits and the things that, don't support you in the lifestyle that are creating symptoms, that are creating problems for you. So usually, when our clients come, people come to us and they, are seeking coaching or do it yourself programs, they're looking for solutions to the symptoms. They're looking for solutions to their, what they call them, like pain points. This is really bothering me. You have XYZ symptoms, and how can you guys help? And then, in the group here, so what we do is we take like our teachings from coaching and our do-it-yourself program, and we implement all the tips and the tricks and things like that here in our free group. So one of the biggest things that comes up a lot is the lack of proteins, adequate amount of proteins for women. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to look at different sources of proteins, and then we're going to also talk about another important factor, what is called decoding labels or reading labels when it comes to looking for healthy proteins. I'm gonna talk about what that means exactly, because that's confusing and it's very broad. So I'm gonna really narrow down that conversation today. Okay, so first and foremost, when we're looking at decoding clean protein labels, so decoding our labels, there's some super important things that we need to look for. So when we look for various proteins, meat proteins, we're looking for like things like grass-fed. And grass-fed means that usually so we're talking about beef specifically here, but there's other grass-fed type of animals as well. It just doesn't mean beef, okay? But that usually means that the cattle is, primarily eats grass. They forage on grass and plants throughout the year. And that's a normal diet for cows, buffalo, deer, depending on, the meat sources. And when they do that, the meat itself stays really, really, really lean. Okay. So when you start getting into grain-fed, commercial raised animals that are not fed their natural diet, where it starts to cause an imbalance, a problem. And what I mean by that is that as we talk about here, we talk about the beneficial nutrients like omega-3 fatty acids can be found in grass-fed animals, which creates a nice balance of an anti-inflammatory effect. So we all, of course, hear, through the nutrition and industry, I say that very broadly, because then there's a whole other ball of wax of stuff that you guys are exposed to that Coach Penny and I just feel so bad that it's so confusing. And there's just so much crap that floats out there in the industry. But we try to work on dispelling those things for you, right? So the grass-fed is a nice balance of omega-3s, which is has an anti-inflammatory effect in your body. So you hear, like about eating fish oils and things with omega-3 fatty acids in them. Well, grass-fed beef is one of those, resources. And when it starts to get, when you start to kind of look at like diseases and inflammation and problems like that, it's when you get into like the commercial stuff. So the commercial animals, which I feel so bad for, but they get stuffed full of grains and other things that aren't, part of their natural reoccurring diet. And that's where the imbalance starts to happen. So the omega-3s get very, 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 very depleted, diminished. And then we start getting more of the inflammatory type of imbalance where the omega-6s and 9s start to become more imbalanced. But also, too, there's a toxic level as well. So, depending on what they're being fed, it can create toxicity in the meat, in the fat. Okay, now this is interesting, so pay attention. So the fat can hold, toxicity, toxins, all right, when the animals are fed a diet that is not their customary primal diet. Now, what does that mean for you? So you eat that, and then you eat the fat in the meat, and then it goes into your body, and then you store it in your fat, right? You probably didn't know that. So let's just let that sink in for a moment, because what happens then, you become toxic. And I'm not just talking about, commercial raised meat. I'm talking about a lot of other inflammatory foods that cause toxicity in the body as well. It's not just about commercial fed meat. But those inflammatory foods are another discussion. So we're talking about meat. Okay, so I wanted to give you, an example that there's, a difference, and you have to understand the difference to make an educated decision when you're purchasing, buying, shopping, looking, and reading labels. Free range is a big word that's thrown around a lot with eggs. And there's actually quite a few different types of titles that are not just free range. Like you'll see things like organic, you'll see things like grain fed, and you'll see things like omega-3 enriched, or you'll see pasture fed, free run, different words, different things, different labels. So free range is humanely raised, such as, poultry, so chickens, okay, and eggs. And they've had access to the outdoors, allowing for natural grazing, primal behaviors. Have a more varied diet, contributing to, improved overall animal welfare and potentially more nutrient-rich products. So this is a very like broad explanation. So as an example, let's talk about depending on where you live in the world. So I'm going to use up, in Canada as an example, into comparison to say Costa Rica, where I live now. We have a climate that is favorable for growing all year round, whereas Canada does not. And we also have an environment that's favorable for things like chickens to roam freely and eat a natural primal diet all year round. Same with the cows. The cows here are very lean. The meat is very, very, very lean. And same with the wild caught fish, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. but we have, the Pacific on one side and we have the Caribbean on the other. And still some fish is still imported, depending on, like as an example, the salmon. So when we talk about free range in those different countries, places from around the world, you have to take into consideration your climate. So, as an example, if you have snow on the ground, like as we do in Ontario or in many parts of Canada, chickens aren't going to be outside grazing on the grass. So they have to be fed a substitute type diet to then produce the eggs, farm fresh eggs. So there's going to be, some differences there. And some of those farmers will practice like a better type of feed diet, which will have, again, it's going to consist of like grains, but some farmers will do like maybe organic grains, so free from pesticides and herbicides. Higher maybe flaxseed, which is, technically going to maybe increase the omega-3s in the product. But again, it depends, right? So here in Costa Rica, we have grazing all year round. So our farmers are up the street. We can see that the chickens, graze on the ground. Actually, our neighbors, their chickens graze on the ground, and they're doing that all day year round. So, they're getting a natural primal diet. So they get exercise, they get sun, which creates vitamin D, strengthens bones. And also too, as well as, they're plucking grass. So we've getting like a healthy omega-3 from grass and plants. And then the fourth component, they're exercising, they're scratching, they're interacting, they're sociable, plucking worms and bugs and things like that. So high protein diet. So some things to take into consideration when you're reading labels and you're shopping for things. You do want to go organic. You do want to know that they're, depending on, the country you're living in, are they grazing in those warmer, hot seasons? And then, what's the type of diet that they're being fed in those off seasons, like winter seasons? Or is the food imported? Is it coming in from somewhere? And if it is, then you investigate a little bit more and say, okay, yeah, it's coming in from a climate where, there is that free range happening all year round, or not. And if it's not, what's the diet? You do have to take responsibility and accountability and research a little bit when it comes to picking and choosing whole foods, um, and things like that, right? Okay, so for wild caught, which is a confusing word, quote unquote, wild caught fish refers to fish and seafoods that were caught in their natural habitat rather than being raised in aquaculture. Okay, so if you don't know what let's try that again. Aquaculture is, it's farmed. Okay, and one example is that there can be like cages, and they're, side by side wherever, and the fish are raised in those cages, so no exercise. They could also be fed um like again, like a grain type of diet, depending on where in the world that's happening. There's lots of different scary stories around that. um but there are different types of fishing, like there's like net fishing, line caught, different things like that. Technically, that is classified as wild caught because they are free to roam, in the oceans or whatever. And then when you start getting into talking about like sustainability and environment and things like that, people will argue, well, that's net fishing, that shouldn't be legal. Like you'll just get all sorts. But in the grand scheme of things, wild caught word, that's what you want to look for. That's a better quality. Um, and again, too, as we've talked about here, it's more of like a sustainable protein source. So some key words: grass-fed, free range, and wild caught are some good key things to look for. So choosing protein options that are void of added colors and preservatives. So if you pick up a package, okay, here's a good example. Let's just go with some frozen seafood as an example. So up north in Canada, sometimes when I would go shopping, I would, oh, I want to get some shrimp or scallops or something, whatever. And I would flip the package over and I would see, okay, I would see like the shrimp, like frozen, whatever. And then there'd be sulfates in it or something else. And I'm like, I'm like, why are you sticking sulfates in it? You don't need to do that. So you want to make sure that when you read the label on things like that, so anything that's like definitely frozen, you want to make sure like there's no color because that can happen. They'll color fish to make it look better. Um, you want to make sure that there's no preservatives like sulfates and stuff in the package. All right. So these additives can lead to metabolic diseases and even cancer. So we want to be very careful about reading our labels and asking questions. Okay, so some great choices, like I was mentioning, grass-fed beef, organic pasture raised chicken. Now with the chickens, like your chicken breasts, like your whole chickens, whatever, organic pasture raised chickens are great. But again, to remember, like the climate is going to vary depending on if you're in like 4 seasons or 2 seasons, whatever the case is. So it's depending on what the animal, is going to be doing there. And then also, with a like an all year round pasture fed chicken, like I was saying, they're outside, they're exercising, they're doing their, their normal daily primal things. Okay, so that's super important. But again, we can't always get that based on the climate that we're in. So we may be able to get organic pasture fed like half the year, and then the other half is not like that. It's more of like a grain fed to finish them off, throughout the colder months. Wild caught fish, that was pretty straightforward. Wild caught, they're out there, they're in the ocean. And again, too, like it's gonna vary, right? Like if it's net catching or, I mean, line catching now is more like a personal thing, of course. Like you're out catching like your own fish on a line, um, different things like that. So wild caught is a good one to use. Pasture raised eggs, as we talked about. Sometimes you'll also see like organic pasture raised as well. That's fine too. Just means that the foods that they're feeding them are organic, or the grasses that they're plucking from have not been sprayed with pesticides and herbicides. And that's super important because organic means that you're not getting those other chemicals that are put on products to kill bugs and all the things, right? So when you're dealing with sprays like for like pesticides and herbicides and things like that, that's a whole other ball of wax, because that means that you're also now ingesting those toxins, and then those toxins get into your body, and then they cause other hormonal disruptions. They cause problems with the liver. The liver won't detoxify properly because it's overloaded, and then it's throwing off other hormonal balances in organs, or it's causing an autoimmune disease or something. Okay, so we just need to be aware that organic means this, but there's a but. Um, so in North America, when you have organic, those labels are not just given out like candy in those specific countries or in those specific, um, uh, like there's organizations like bodies that regulate that. But in a country here like this in Costa Rica, um, there's like, it's questionable. Like they'll say it's organic, but I'm not really sure that it is. So can you talk to your person that's selling you organic, quote unquote, and ask them, hey, like, is this really organic? Are they going to lie to you and not tell you the truth? More than likely. So we have to take into consideration what we can control. We control, and then the things that we can't, we just have to let go to some degree, and we have to support ourselves in other ways. Okay. Okay. So just a little checklist to round out our discussion. Actually, I have two more points before I let you go. So shopping for clean protein checklist, do's and don'ts. All right. You want to prioritize whole foods, not in a box, and you want to overlook processed options. Okay. So, okay. Read labels. Yes. Just like we talked about today. And remember, like the group here, like we support you guys. So if there's questions or something that you have, take a picture of something that you're not sure about, you can post it in the group. I have to approve it just to let you know. So it won't just go in the group automatically because we monitor everything coming in and out of the group. So you can post it, ask the question, and then we'll get to you. And then remember, because like whatever questions you have, other people probably have those same questions, or they're going to learn from you. You know, they're going to learn from your question, they're going to learn from our answers. So reading labels, don't ignore the labels, always be cautious of that. As a sidebar note, when we ran the sugar challenge back in January, we were really, I guess, surprised or not surprised that, you know, so many people said, oh, hey, you know, like I just didn't even really read labels until I started doing the challenge. And, you know, we gave them, the group members that did the free challenge, we gave them a whole label reader PDF file to help them, you know, get educated on how to do that. And that's super great. And that challenge, actually, we run that on the Tuesday posts. I put it up every Tuesday. So you have access to that challenge anytime you want. So you can always click on that, opt in, get your package, and then just dive on into that free challenge. Okay, so diversify your resources of protein. So this is super important. One of the key fundamentals in the coaching program that we teach, or the do-it-yourself programs that we teach. I always tell the clients that it is super important to make sure that you're rotating your meat proteins. So a lot of people get stuck in the same old routine. Now, let me explain why this does not work, or why it eventually will not work. Is that number one, you get food fatigue. Number two, you get bored, partial, like hand in hand with food fatigue. Number three, you're only getting certain vitamins, you know, amino acids. Okay, I'm gonna talk about amino acids in a second. Nutrients, minerals, and things like that from, you know, certain choices. So as an example, you know, most of the time what I see in people's food journals when they're submitting them to me is that they will consistently eat the same things over and over again. They'll consistently eat chicken breast, the same thing. They'll consistently eat eggs, the same thing over and over again. Those are one of the two biggest common ones. And in our fundamentals manual inside our coaching programs, one of the modules that one of the fundamentals that I teach and very passionate about is the protein fundamental. So we talk about options and choices and how much protein each person, so each individual person, should be getting. And I talk very in depth about the importance of meat proteins, and then I talk about the importance of the amino acids that's in those meat proteins, right? So the amino acids inside meat proteins are essential. That means that you have to get them from meat proteins. You can't get them, the body doesn't make them. Okay, that's why they're essential. And then when we start talking about plant proteins and things like that, you have to be diversified in understanding, you know, when you mix certain plant proteins together, that you're getting some of the essential amino acids, not all of them. And this is where deficiencies can come in and problems can lie. So when we talk about meat proteins, we're very passionate about it, because when we're trying to help people make healthy changes towards, you know, balancing hormones, keeping a lean waistline, Of course, we tell our women they have to, they should be strength training, lifting weights, stressing the muscles. And of course, you need essential amino acids to make hormones, to produce neurotransmitters, to make you think and function properly. And also, too, your meat proteins provide you with essential B vitamins and things like iron as well. Okay, so I went on a rampage. I apologize. So diversify your sources. That's super, super key. Yes, yes, yes. And then not rely, oh, this is another one. So then not relying solely on supplements. Yes, yes. So supplements, people will always say, well, what should I be taking? What should I be doing? And this is actually a whole other conversation when it comes to supplements. But I also want to point out as well in the Sunday posts. So this past Sunday it went out. So every Sunday for the month of July, we've included, if you share our group information, we've included in there a free PDF of what supplements are a common good resource to use. So as a holistic nutritionist, what I look at, first of all, number one, I look at the person as an individual. I also understand that that individual will change. Our body does that. It never stays static. So our needs change. That's important. And what the person is working on currently, what are they trying to work on? And what's the deficiencies that are coming up that we need to support right away? That's how we determine what kind of supplements that we're going to use. Supplements are a compacted way of getting certain nutrients, minerals, amino acids, whatever, vitamins, things into your diet in a large sum. But you shouldn't be relying solely on supplements as a way to live. And what I mean by that is that your foods, the foods that you're eating to support your body, and then the supplements should be a source of supplements. They supplement things that you need to work on. Sidebar onto that is that then there's like a little mini insurance policy. So what we call that is, things that you can incorporate on a regular basis to help support your current diet. So things like omega-3s, things like a really good multivitamin. And multivitamins are a whole other topic of discussion. Multivitamins are not made up of the same things. They're not made up of the same ingredients. One product from another product to another product does make a difference. And that's a whole other conversation. Okay, so considering sustainable options. So up above in the presentation live today, we talked about sustainable options. So we looked at those, and then disregarding things like animal welfare. We talked about the differences with commercial raised animals. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the live training today. If you have any questions or anything, remember that you can park those questions down in the comments below. And I hope it kind of gives a little bit of a better understanding about, the differences in proteins and selections and labels. One of the things I did a live not too long ago about how much protein an individual should consider. Let me know if you want that video. I can drop the link in the comments, okay? And that way I don't need to kind of go back into explaining all that again. So if that's something that's of interest to you, just let me know and just say, just let me know in the comments below. Okay, guys, great seeing you again, and we'll see you back here next Wednesday for my next live, and Coach Penny will see you on Friday for her live. All right, guys, bye for now.